these and other issues in the coming months. I would be pleased now to answer your questions.
Thank you, Chairman. Now we'd like to pause for a second, allow Ranking Member Waxman to give his opening statement. Mr. Waxman, you're recognized.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chairman. I apologize for being late. The other subcommittee that's meeting at the same time started late. So I'm here, and I wanted to thank you, and especially Chairman McFarland and her fellow commissioners for being here today. I want to use my opening remarks to comment on a really bad idea. That's the bill that we will be examining today. The bill includes a laundry list of changes to the Nuclear Regulatory Commission's internal procedures that dredge up old disputes that the Commission has already worked through. After the 3 Mile Island meltdown in 1979, Congress and the Carter administration recognized the importance of centralized emergency authority in the event of a domestic nuclear crisis. The reorganization plan of 1980 addressed this concern and established the basic responsibilities of the chairman and the commissioners of the Nuclear Regulatory Commission. The Terry bill purports to codify the reorganization plan, but it actually rescinds the plan and ignores a key lesson learned from the 3 Mile Island, that the United States needs a single clear decision maker during a nuclear emergency. The bill takes exactly the opposite approach by undermining the chairman's authority in a crisis. It requires the NRC chairman to involve other commissioners in emergency decisions. The bill even prevents the chairman from taking any emergency actions until she notifies the 4 commissioners, 2 congressional committees, and the general public that she has declared an emergency. I think that's a troublesome idea. If a nuclear meltdown is happening at a U.S. reactor, we don't need a bureaucracy. We need the chair to act quickly and decisively. We should not require her to call a host of commissioners and members of Congress, along with the NRC's website, administrator, or public affairs office before exercising emergency authority. The impact of this bill could be truly disastrous in a nuclear crisis. And that's not the only troubling change in the bill. Not long ago, the Commission was struggling with a nasty personal conflict. While the Commission seems to have moved past that discord under the leadership of Chairman McFarland, Mr. Terry and the committee Republicans can't seem to let it go. The Terry bill would stir the pot by reopening past disputes. We need NRC focused on nuclear safety, not constantly rewriting its internal procedures. The effect of virtually every proposed change in the bill is to shift authority from the NRC chair to the other commissioners. It even would mandate that the commissioners complain to the President and Congress about any perceived violations of the bill's requirements by the chair. That's not likely to encourage continued collegiality. There is one NRC internal procedure that's not addressed by the Terry bill, and that should be changed. But that should be changed. The Commission recently revised its policy for how it handles a congressional request for non-public documents. Previously, NRC provided documents requested by the agency's oversight committees as well as individual members on those committees or with nuclear facilities in their districts. Under the new policy, NRC will not provide non-public documents to individual members and may withhold sensitive documents from chairmen and ranking members as well. I think this is a misguided and dangerous policy. If Mrs. Capps wants to see a document related to Diablo Canyon, she should get it. If Mr. Terry wants information about Fort Calhoun, he should get it. This is not a partisan issue. It's about the institutional oversight responsibilities of this committee and its members. And I encourage all 5 commissioners to rethink this flawed policy, and I look forward to further discussing this issue today. Mr. Chairman, thank you for your courtesy, and I have to apologize in advance because I have to be at another subcommittee at the same time at this subcommittee, and cloning has not advanced sufficiently for me to be both places at once, but I'll be back and forth as much as possible. Thank you.
Gentleman yields back time. I'm sure a lot of people are glad that you're not able to be cloned yet, Mr. Waxman. So we will miss you, though. And I'm sure Mr. Terry appreciates your ability to comment on his bill. So with that, we turn back to the commissioners. Again, welcome. Commissioner Svinicki, you're recognized for 5 minutes.
Thank you. Thank you, Chairman Shimkus, Chairman Whitfield, Ranking Member Waxman, Ranking Member Tonko, and members of the subcommittees for the opportunity to appear before you today at this oversight hearing on NRC management and the potential need for legislative reform. The Commission's Chairman, Dr. Allison McFarland, in her statement on behalf of the Commission, has provided a comprehensive description of key agency accomplishments and challenges in carrying out NRC's important mission of protecting public health and safety and promoting the common defense and security of our nation. The circumstances in which we find ourselves carrying out this mission require constant adaptation of our approaches. This point was communicated very directly last month in a message sent from NRC's senior career official, the Executive Director for Operations, Mark Sartorius, to all NRC agency employees. His message was as follows: our future is likely to be dynamic and unpredictable, and the agency will need to remain highly flexible and agile as we respond to new events and external pressures. We will need to continually evaluate the work we are doing, give careful consideration as to how best to use resources, and remain focused on safety and security. I agree with Mr. Sartorius' statement. As an organization which embraces the precepts of continuous learning, the NRC consistently seeks to improve its internal organizational effectiveness. As a member of this Commission, I will work with my Commission colleagues and the NRC staff to support the agency's assessment of how we can accomplish our work efficiently and effectively with the circumstances and factors we face today. I am confident that the NRC's dedicated and highly professional staff members are up to the task of meeting these challenges, as they have proven time and again over the course of the agency's history. I thank them for their sustained commitment to the agency, to its work, and to each other. Thank you. I appreciate the opportunity to appear today and look forward to questions.
Thank you. Chair now recognizes Commissioner Apostolakis, and you're recognized for 5 minutes.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Good morning, Chairman Shimkus, Ranking Member Tonko, Chairman Whitfield, Ranking Member Rush, and distinguished members of the subcommittees. Today I would like to offer a few comments on the issue of cumulative effects of regulation. The agency is addressing concerns about cumulative effects of regulation in several ways. For example, the NRC staff has implemented enhancements to our rulemaking process. These enhancements include the concurrent publication of guidance with proposed and final rules, as well as a specific solicitation of public comment on cumulative effects when the agency publishes proposed rules. Aside from the rulemaking enhancements, the NRC staff has also been receptive to industry proposals for adjustments to implementation schedules for post-Fukushima actions when justified. In addition, in February of this year, the Commission directed the NRC staff to develop options for allowing licensees to prioritize the implementation of regulatory actions as an integrated set and in a way that reflects their risk significance on a plant-specific basis. The NRC staff and industry representatives are currently exploring in public meetings the idea of piloting this proposal. The rationale behind this initiative is, first, that nuclear power plant risk is very site-specific, and second, that focusing on just one area of regulation, such as post-Fukushima safety enhancements, ignores other important safety-significant work that the agency is doing, such as fire protection. In closing, the NRC remains keenly focused on its core safety and security mission and on utilizing our resources in a way that will have the greatest impact on improving safety. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Chair now recognizes Commissioner Magwood for 5 minutes.
Thank you, Chairman. Good morning, Chairman Shimkus, Chairman Whitfield, Ranking Member Tomko. It's a pleasure to appear before you today. We appreciate your oversight, even when the questions are hard, because we think it's very important that we have a chance to share our thoughts about these important issues. Chairman McFarland's written and oral comments capture the full range of the activities that we have underway, so I won't dwell on that. But As you can see, it's been a very, very busy time for the NRC. We've made considerable progress in a wide range of areas in recent years, including dealing with low-level waste issues, updating radiation protection standards, licensing the first new nuclear power plants since the 1970s. However, to this day, most public congressional attention has been placed on response to the disaster of Fukushima Daiichi. Since March 2011, the NRC has learned very important lessons from this tragedy and has taken clear and appropriate action to enhance U.S. nuclear safety. We've kept our pledge to neither overreact nor underreact to the events in Japan, and I think we've gotten it just about right. At the same time, U.S. nuclear industry has also absorbed the lessons of Fukushima and has responded with strategies that, once fully implemented, could provide safety benefits that are actually beyond our regulatory requirements. Perhaps more importantly, the mindset of our licensees have changed in the face of Fukushima. 2 months ago, all the chief nuclear officers of the U.S. nuclear utilities traveled to Japan as a group to inspect the Fukushima site and talk with those who managed the disaster. The personal insights they gained on this trip may have benefits far beyond anything that we can regulate. Our challenge now, both NRC and its licensees, is to absorb the post-Fukushima activities into our normal work and prioritize it appropriately. Doing so will require us to understand how to manage the preparation for low-probability extreme events in concert with the enduring need to protect against much more likely accident scenarios. Commissioner Apostolakis' comments this morning point to an initiative that we've undertaken that will help in that direction. But this is a big challenge, and the steps that we take in this space will have significant and far-reaching implications for many years to come. As we strive to meet these challenges, the NRC will have, as always, the benefit of the very talented NRC staff and the highly experienced people who lead them. Since we last appeared before this committee, the Commission has appointed a new Executive Director of Operations, Mark Sartorius, and a new General Counsel, Margie Doan. Both have already had a very strong positive impact on the agency, and I look forward to continuing to work with them. Thank you for your attention. I look forward to your questions this morning.
Thank you, Commissioner. Commissioner Ostendorf, you're recognized for 5 minutes.
Thank you, Chairman Shimkus, Chairman Whitfield, Ranking Member Tonko, members of the committee. For a chance to be before you today. The NRC continues to effectively fulfill its safety oversight role by ensuring the proper safe operation of our nearly 100 operating reactors and the 5 reactors under construction across the country. As a learning organization, the NRC is always seeking to leverage operating experience, and as a result, we continue to evaluate the lessons learned from Fukushima, and as noted by the Chairman, are initiating safety improvements where appropriate. I am very confident in the decisions the NRC has made to date in this area, and I believe the Commission is functioning properly as a body as intended by Congress and the administration. Others have already talked about the waste confidence remand. I won't address that. I will talk very briefly about the Yucca Mountain licensing process. I think the November 18th order issued by the Commission reflected very careful thought and deliberation amongst these 5 commissioners at this table. I think there's a very solid order that was put out here less than a month ago. I expect that we will have sufficient funds to complete the safety evaluation reports, which I believe are important. And we will continue to keep this committee informed of those activities as we go forward on monthly reports. I'd also note that many nuclear power plants in this country today are operating under challenging and different economic conditions than in the past. Potentially costly repairs and the low price of natural gas have led to the permanent shutdown of 4 nuclear power plants this year. And Vermont Yankees announced they will shut down next year because they are no longer economically viable. Interest in new reactors, as a matter of fact, has also waned in the current economic climate. That said, the NRC will remain vigilant to ensure that plants continue to be operated safely, and we will provide appropriate oversight for decommissioning activities. As others at this table have noted, we are also looking at the changing demands in our workload, and we have a responsibility to ensure that our staff is appropriately right-sized. I appreciate this hearing, the committee's oversight role, and I look forward to your questions.
Thank you, Commissioner. Now I'd like to recognize myself for 5 minutes for an opening set of questions. Because Commissioner Apostolakis, because of your recusal, I'm not going to ask you to respond to this series of questions because they're basically all in direction to Yucca Mountain. So we'll go with Chairman McFarland and then from my left to right on the answering of the questions. Pursuant to your duties as Commissioner, will you make every effort to fully and faithfully comply with the law? Yes or no? Chairman?
Of course, I will make every effort to comply with the law.
Thank you.
Yes.
Absolutely.
Yes.
The D.C. Circuit reaffirmed in its August 13th decision that the Nuclear Waste Policy Act, and I quote, provides that the Nuclear Regulatory Commission, and in under quotation marks, shall consider the Department of Energy's license application to store nuclear waste at Yucca Mountain, and, again, in subquotes, shall issue a final decision approving or disapproving, close subquotes, the application. Is that correct?
We are now in the process of,
No, just a statement that this is the D.C. court affirmed, and this is what they've affirmed that you will do.
the D.C. court affirmed that we would continue with the licensing process using the existing nuclear waste funds that we have.
Correct. So you agree with the statement from the court, and that's okay. Commissioner?
Yes, I agree that the court affirmed that.
I agree.
I agree.
In its November 18th order addressing the D.C. Circuit Court's writ of mandamus, you all acknowledge that it does not have sufficient funds to complete the license review and issue a final decision. Is that correct?
We do not have sufficient funds to complete the licensing review. That's correct.
The funds NRC has would be insufficient for making that decision.
Great, thank you.
That's correct.
That's correct.
When an agency is legally bound to implement a statutorily mandated action but finds it lacks sufficient resources, do you believe it is incumbent upon that agency to request the funding necessary to comply?
Budget decisions are decisions of the commission, and we will discuss them as a commission.
So is that a yes or a no?
That's budget decisions are decisions of the commission, and we will.
Okay, well, let me just ask it again, just so we understand the question. When an agency is legally bound, as you've all agreed, to implement a statutorily mandated action, but finds it lacks the sufficient resources, do you believe it is incumbent upon the agency that's legally mandated by law that you would request the funding necessary to comply?
I believe we're complying with the law. We're complying with the court's decision now, and going forward, we will discuss any future budget decisions as a commission.
All right. This is where I always get frustrated. So your response is that even though you're legally mandated to comply with the law and you don't have sufficient funds, you don't think it's incumbent upon you to request the needed funds to comply with the law?
I think we will discuss this as a commission and go forward with it.
Why don't you just answer, it's the law, we're required to comply, and we need to add a request to fund that ability?
We will certainly comply with the law, and I will comply with the law.
Okay. Commissioner Stefaniki?
Yes, I believe that agencies should formulate and request budgets that comply with the law.
Commissioner Magwood?
I think that we will formulate a budget that complies with the law, and we will consult with legal advice within the agency and outside the agency.
Yeah, it's really not a quick. I'm not trying. It's not really a quick trying to be tricky. It's just saying, and that budget may not get approved. It may not get presented forward. But the basic question: if the law says you got to comply, and you say we don't have the money to comply, I don't think it's a tough response to say, and I will ask for the money I need to comply with the law. Commissioner Ostendorf?
I understand your frustration at the responses here. This is a very challenging issue. As an individual commissioner, I'll have an opinion. As a member of the commission, I'll also work with commissioner colleagues here to my right to, I think your question is directly with respect to the FY15, FY16 budget process. Will we be requesting additional funds for the high-level waste licensing? And I think that we have an obligation to follow the law. But I also note that this will be a commission decision as to how we move forward with the budget request.
But the question is to you as an individual commissioner.
Yes.
Thank you. And my time's almost expired. Let me finish with this. As a statement, the NRC has not, as you noted, submitted a supplemental budget request to the Office of Management and Budget for additional nuclear waste funds based upon the November 21st letter that you sent to us. So my time's expired. I'll now yield to the ranking member, Mr. Tonko, for 5 minutes.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, and again, welcome. After the 3 Mile Island accident, President Carter convened a commission to identify lessons learned in order to improve nuclear safety and ensure a more timely and effective response to nuclear emergencies. The panel concluded that the Nuclear Regulatory Commission needed a clear leader who acts as the agency's chief executive officer. The panel also concluded that in a nuclear emergency, the country needs a single, unified voice to take charge and make decisions. I'm concerned that H.R. 3132 takes us backward and ignores these important lessons. The bill deletes the provision of the reorganization plan that consolidates emergency authority with the chair. Under the bill, the chair may not exercise emergency authority unless and until the chair satisfies 2 criteria. First, she must formally declare that a specific emergency exists. Second, before taking any action, she must notify the other 4 commissioners, the relevant congressional committees, and the general public. I can understand the benefit of a formal declaration, but if the chair gets a call at 3 a.m. that a nuclear power plant is in meltdown, why would we require her first action to be calling her congressional affairs and public affairs staff rather than calling for an evacuation? Chair McFarland, do you think a requirement for you to notify this committee and the Senate before taking any emergency action in response to a nuclear crisis is appropriate?
I think that the existing internal commission procedures on this issue are adequate. I believe that the commission is operating collegially, and I think that no changes are needed at this time.
Thank you. Should an action to respond directly to the crisis be the first item on your agenda?
No, I don't believe so.
Let me ask the other commissioners, do any of you think that the chair should have to put out a press release or update the NRC website to fulfill a public notice requirement before exercising emergency authority in an urgent situation when time is of the essence? Commissioner Spinicki?
Under our procedures, the chairman heads an executive team that immediately begins to respond to the emergency. And I would just note that the NRC does not make the decision on evacuations. That is done by the governor of the state in which the accident is occurring.
And Commissioner Apostolakis.
No, as you pointed out, there was a very clear message from 3 Mile Island that the chair should be the decision maker during an accident. Last time with Fukushima, there were some issues that were raised regarding when the commissioners were notified that the chairman had assumed emergency powers. And certainly, I don't think that the chairman should have to worry about notifying the other commissioners when she is notified that there is an accident and action needs to be taken. At some point later, probably she would have to do that.
Thank you. Commissioner Magwood.
Yeah, I think Commissioner Apostolakis' explanation is correct. I think it makes a great deal of sense to enable the chairman to take immediate action in the face of an emergency. But I do also think that it's important that the chairman, at an appropriate time during the crisis, notify the chairman's colleagues that emergency powers have been declared and that a situation such as that exists to provide clarity. Because, quite frankly, when this was used previously, there was a long period of time where there was no clarity as to whether the emergency was actually declared or not, and that created a great deal of confusion within the agency.
Thank you. Commissioner Ostendorf.
I agree with Commissioner Magwood's characterization.
Thank you. Let me ask the other commissioners, do any of you think that the chair should have to put out a press release or update the NRC website to fulfill a public notice requirement before exercising emergency authority in an urgent situation when time indeed is of the essence? Commissioner Spinicki?
I don't believe a press release should be the highest priority item.
No, she should not have to do that.
Commissioner?
No, that should not be the first action.
And Commissioner Ostendorf?
Not the first action.
H.R. 3132 also establishes a greater role for the commissioners in an emergency. For example, the bill requires the chair to consult with the full commission before taking any regulatory or policy actions during an emergency as appropriate, and it elevates the involvement of all the commissioners in making decisions that, quote, may affect commission actions and policies beyond the response to a particular emergency. That could be interpreted differently by different commissioners and clouds the authority of the chair. So, Chair McFarland, during a nuclear emergency, would your time be better spent actually responding to the emergency or engaging in discussions with your colleagues about whether a particular response might affect policy in the future?
Having personally practiced emergency drills with my NRC colleagues and staff, it's clear that time is of the essence, and situations change rapidly. It's important to be able to be as responsive as quickly as possible. I would certainly, and have pledged before, to keep my colleagues informed to my best ability of all actions and the situation.
Thank you. I know my time has expired, so with that, I'll yield back.
Gentleman yields back his time. Chair now recognizes the gentleman from Kentucky, Mr. Whitfield, the chairman of the Energy and Air Quality Subcommittee.
Thank you, Chairman Shimkus, and thank you all for your opening statements and for, as I said earlier, being with us today. I'm going to ask a question relating to a comment that I made in my opening statement, and that is about over the past 10 years, the number of licensing actions and tasks have decreased by 40%, and yet the nuclear safety budget has increased by 48%. So you just look at those numbers, and I think a person could be quite critical of the agency and say, well, your responsibility is going down, your budget's going up, and the country has a debt now approaching $18 trillion. So I would just ask each of you individually, if you wouldn't mind just commenting briefly on, is criticism like this valid, or is there a valid reason for budgets to go up that much and the workload going down? Chairman McFarland.
Thank you. I would like to submit this for the record.
Okay.
This is a chart of the budget of the NRC in actual dollars and in constant dollars from 2003 to this fiscal year 2013.
Okay.
And I think you can see that basically, if you look at the constant dollars, which is the correct comparison over time,
right, that
the budget now in 2013 is the lowest it's been since 2007. And in 2007, that was before we had Yucca Mountain, we had Waste Confidence, and we had Fukushima. So I would argue we are doing now much more with less.
And what is the total budget for this year?
In constant dollars, the total budget is this is $671 million versus in 2007 it was $680 million.
So your budget, your position is then in constant dollars, you're roughly the same or less.
Less, yeah.
And the workload
is higher.
The workload is higher.
Yes.
So even though the applications and licensing actions is going down, the workload is higher.
Yes.
And why is that?
The workload is higher because since 2007, at least, we've had the Yucca Mountain application, we've had Waste Confidence decision, and of course we've had the Fukushima accident, which has added on to our workload quite significantly.
And all of you agree with that assessment, I'm assuming. Do you, Ms. Savinsky?
I would just note that there isn't a direct correspondence between the budget amount and the number of industry-generated items for review in front of us. We do have a number of constant activities that simply must be budgeted every year. Responding more generally to the criticism, you asked for a reaction to the criticism. I would say that, as noted by members of the committee in their opening statements, this is clearly not the world in 2013 that NRC had the trajectory that we had been planning for. And so I do agree with Commissioner Ostendorf's statement. It's appropriate for this commission and for the agency to be looking at the right sizing and the application of resources to activities. Okay. I think we attempt to do that on a pretty constant basis.
Okay, thanks. I'm running out of time. I do want to ask another question. In your opening statement, Ms. McFarland, you referred to a new modular reactor process to start considering those. I would like to ask each of you to comment just briefly on your view of the potential of modular reactors and whether or not they can play an important role or not. We'll start with you, Chairman.
Sure. I think they're an interesting, very interesting innovation, and you know, we'll see. We're waiting for their applications, and I'm very interested in seeing how this technology progresses.
Okay. Savinsky.
Well, our colleagues at the U.S. Department of Energy have the tough job of looking at the merits of the various innovations of the developers of this technology, because DOE has programs to fund some of the technology development. But we do expect, as a safety authority, to be receiving some designs for review, and we've worked hard to prepare the agency to be ready to do those reviews.
Okay. Mr. Amastakos.
Well, the industry is spending serious dollars in developing the designs of these reactors, so there must be potential there.
Okay. Mr. Magwood.
I honestly don't know. I'm waiting. I think I'm like many people. I'm waiting to see, because in the past, with small reactors, the challenge has never really been just technical. It's always been economic and financial. And until these products are on the market, it'll be very difficult to know for sure. So I'm waiting and seeing.
Thank you.
I'll just comment, Chairman Whitfield, that I think we're ready as an agency to receive the applications. We've probably gone as far as we can, absent an actual license application in hand. We expect to get one latter part of 2014.
Thank you very much. Thank you.
Gentleman yields back the time. Chair, now recognize the gentleman from California, Mr. McNerney, for 5 minutes.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Mr. McFarland, I think you gave an answer to an earlier question that you may have intended another answer to give. Shouldn't an action in response directly to a crisis be the first item on your agenda? Shouldn't responding to a crisis be the first item, safety be the first item on your agenda?
Yes, in the event of an emergency?
Yes.
Yes, of course.
Thank
Sorry.
you. Regarding nuclear waste, Ms. McFarland, is local public acceptance necessary for implementation of a nuclear waste disposal site?
I think this is an area of discussion. The Blue Ribbon Commission on America's Nuclear Future looked at this issue. They said that consensus was an important piece of siting, that siting decisions weren't just technical decisions, but they were also societal. I think if you look at the experience of other countries on this issue, ones that have been more successful recently, countries like Sweden and Finland and France, that local consensus is important.
Good. Does Yucca Mountain have local public acceptance?
It's not for the Nuclear Regulatory Commission to judge that, I'm afraid.
Okay, that's fair enough. In November, Mr. McFarland, the U.S. Court of Appeals for the district ruled that the Department of Energy can no longer collect the $750 million in annual waste disposal fees from nuclear operators. How is this ruling going to affect the NRC's ability to develop nuclear waste storage sites?
At the moment, it's not going to affect us at all.
Okay. I'm not sure which commissioner to ask this question of, but how long would it take to get a license reviewed for a new nuclear power plant design?
For a new power plant design?
Right. From scratch.
From design certification?
Right.
It takes some months to a few years. It should, but it depends in large part on the quality of the application. And if there are problems with the application, then we have a number of iterations with the applicant. But maybe my colleagues would like to comment.
When I hear horror stories about how long it takes, 5 years or 10 years, that's likely to be due to some problems in the application.
It does take around that time, sometimes longer, but it's several years. Now, if there are really new designs like the small modular reactors, there will be several policy issues that will have to be resolved. So I really don't know how long that will take.
There's no such thing as the average case with these things, but on average, I would expect that a design certification is usually about a 3-year exercise. But to actually implement that, to build a plant, takes considerably longer, and it really depends on the situation. For example, if another applicant comes to build an AP1000 plant, which has already been certified and which as you noted, was under construction, That would be a much shorter process than if someone came to us with a completely new design. So it depends on exactly what the application is.
Thank you. Mr. Magwood, I appreciate your comment about the Commission's challenge in balancing the potential for for low probability events versus the day-to-day events that need constant attention. How does the Commission go about making those sort of decisions?
We're working on that right now.
Thank you. Mr. Pastelakis, one of the things you said was, and I think I'm quoting it, the cumulative effects of regulation. That sounds like something out of Fox News. Could you clarify what you meant by that, please?
We have, especially after the Fukushima accident and the regulations that started coming out of the Commission, there were a lot of complaints by the industry that we are issuing regulations without considering other regulations that they have to comply with. So each decision of the Commission is focused only on that particular regulation, and the industry wants the Commission to think about the cumulative effects. What is it that they have to do? Do they have the resources? Do they have the time? And is every single regulation or request by the NRC of equal importance? So that's the issue of cumulative effects of regulation, and the Commission has responded.
Okay, thank you.
I didn't know my colleague was a fan of Fox News. Chair now recognizes gentleman from Texas, Mr. Barton, for 5 minutes.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, on this joint hearing. I was pleasantly surprised to learn that NRC can review a design application in a few months. You got 3 right now that have been under review for over 5 to 7 years. Might go back and try to whip those out before Christmas, since it doesn't take but a month or 2. I'm going to ask Mr. Shimkus this question a little bit different way. Since Yucca Mountain is back under review, and since all the Commission indicates that you don't have the resources to complete the review process, anybody want to estimate about how much additional funding you might need? Ms. Savinski, what's your guess on that? And that's not a trick question. I'm just interested.
In order to assess and develop the order that we issued last month that restarted the licensing process, we did receive some input. I don't want to say they have the full fidelity of a budget estimate, but we attempted to have submitted to us both by the adjudicatory board and also the staff some estimates for these activities. But I would not characterize to you, sir, that we have a complete current estimate for getting all the way to a final licensing decision. We do know that restarting the adjudication would be a resource-intensive activity.
I'm not trying to be cute here. I want a general ballpark estimate. Are we talking about a few million, several hundred million, $1 billion? I mean, just some sort of order of magnitude.
For NRC's activities alone, again, this depends on how the Department of Energy is resourced to support our activities, because they're also a participant in this. It's very difficult for me to estimate the total dollar. Before activities were suspended, our budget requests from NRC were varying. They were approximately, in some years they were very close to $100 million just for our review activities for a single year. That began to taper down a bit, I think closer to $50 million a year. But so based on where it had been in previous years when the review was underway, I think your estimate of the hundreds of millions is probably the area of it's very difficult to estimate.
That's good enough. Madam Chairwoman, has the Commission or the administration, if not the Commission, taken a position on Mr. Terry's reform bill?
Has the Commission as a whole? No. It has not.
Do you have an opinion on his bill?
Yes, my personal opinion is that it's not necessary at this time, and it may have unintended consequences.
Okay. Any other commissioner wish to give your opinions on his bill? You don't have to. I'm just interested.
I'll comment, Congressman Barton. I think in July of last year, I responded to a QFR following a hearing to Chairman Shimkus, and the gist of my position was that with Chairman McFarland here, the challenges we had as a commission with the previous chairman have gone away, that we're operating in an open collegial environment. So some of the issues, the motivations behind the challenges we had have disappeared, but there are a couple of areas where there'd be greater clarity on some aspects of Congressman Terry's legislation. There's some aspects that I personally told Chairman Shimkus via my written response dealing with clarification of invocation of emergency powers, for instance, would benefit from greater clarity in the statute.
Okay, good. My last question, the last time the commission was here, I pointed out to the chairman that you hadn't given a report on the Fukushima accident, and you finally did issue a report last week, so that's the good news. The not so good news is there's still lots of things that the report didn't address. I'm just going to go through a very quick listing of what the staff has indicated to me was not addressed in the report. You didn't address the fact that the U.S. has an independent regulator yourself. Japan does not. The U.S. has an Institute of Nuclear Power Operators to establish best management practices. Japan does not. The U.S. requires plant-specific training. Japan does not. The U.S. requires severe accident management guidelines. Japan does not. The U.S. requires complex training scenarios, site-specific. Japan does not. The U.S. requires water level procedures for boiling water reactors. Japan does not. The U.S. requires site-specific evaluation criteria. Japan does not. And the U.S. has a requirement for design basic flood planning that Japan does not. Now, all these things that the U.S. does, we can give your commission kudos for requiring that. That's a good thing. The fact that none of this was considered in your evaluation of the accident, my question to the chairwoman, do you consider the report that was issued last week to be the final word, or do you agree with me that more work needs to be done?
The report that was issued last week noted that it wasn't comprehensive, but it noted that there were similar design basis requirements between the U.S. and Japan prior to the accident, but that there were different approaches to beyond design basis events and severe accidents. At the same time, the report concluded that there was no evidence that a Fukushima-type accident would have been necessarily avoided in the U.S. And I go back to something Commissioner Ossendorf mentioned earlier, I think maybe in his opening statement, about the importance of operating experience. And in the nuclear industry, operating experience is essential. And from the accident, we learned that we had not taken into consideration a number of important issues. We had not, prior to that accident, considered that more than one reactor could melt down at the same time, for instance. There were a number of other issues that we did not consider. And I just want to point out that this is not something unique to the United States, to the NRC, that we discovered this. All other significant nuclear regulators around the world came to the same conclusions, and we're all implementing very similar changes as a result.
My time's expired. I would ask all the other commissioners to answer that question in writing for the record, Mr. Chairman.
Without objection, all members will be allowed to follow up this hearing with written questions. The chair now recognizes our colleague from the Virgin Islands, Ms. Christensen, for 5 minutes.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, and thank you for holding this hearing. It's always important for the committee to exercise its oversight authority over this commission, as we did with FCC, but not to really interfere in the day-to-day decision-making of the commission. I want to focus on the Terry bill for a moment, and it overhauls the respective responsibilities of the chairman and commissioners of the Nuclear Regulatory Commission and essentially rewrites the commission's internal procedures. Chairwoman McFarland, do you think it's necessary or productive to have Congress rewriting the details of NRC's internal commission procedures?
I think, as I said before, that the current internal commission procedures are quite adequate, and that we we need to be careful in any kind of changes that are made to the emergency powers piece, because we don't want any unintended consequences. We don't want to go back to a pre-3 Mile Island kind of situation and structure at the NRC.
Thank you. You know, I note that the Commission spent 3 years debating and more than 1 year voting on its last revisions to internal procedures. Many of the issues raised by the Terry bill were worked out by the Commissioners themselves, yourselves, in 2011. So I don't really understand why we would want to reopen disputes that have really already been resolved by the Commission. The bill would set inflexible deadlines for commissioners to vote on atomic safety and licensing board reviews. The Commission's current procedures do not set rigid deadlines and allow for extensions for commissioners who need additional time to reach a decision. So, Chair, Lady McFarland, do you think it makes sense to have strict voting deadlines without the possibility of extensions?
Well, the NRC is a adjudicatory body. The Atomic Safety and Licensing Board is an adjudicatory body, and some of the cases that they receive are quite complex, both technically and legally, and sometimes they take quite a while to resolve. I know of no other court or adjudicatory body that has statutory time limits, that operates under statutory time limits.
Thank you. And right now, the NRC chair develops the budget and presents it to the Commission for its review and approval. Under the bill, NRC staff would present the budget, not the chairman. So again, Chairwoman McFarland, do you think it makes sense to strip the NRC chairman of the responsibility to present an annual budget to the Commission?
I think it's important for a collegial body to function properly that someone has to have a leadership role, and somebody has to, in this case, present a budget. I think it's important for oversight committees to have somebody to hold accountable. So,
and I would imagine that budget is, the development of that budget takes place with staff, with the executive director, but it's you.
It does, and I think you could ask my colleagues to comment that the budget development that has occurred since I've been there has been done in a collegial and collaborative manner.
I want to try to finish up one more question. Back in October 2011, 4 NRC commissioners sent a letter to the White House Chief of Staff to express concern about the then chairman, Jasko. It was a low point in the breakdown of the relationship among commissioners, and Mr. Terry's bill actually requires commissioners to send future letters to the president if they believe the chairperson has not complied with NRC internal procedures. So again, Chair Lady McFarland, do you think this mandate makes sense? Is it going to encourage continued collegiality among the chairman and commissioners?
You know, I don't want to comment on what happened before me, but I think I just will say and maintain that I think now the Commission is operating collegially and collaboratively, and I encourage you to check with my Commission colleagues on that issue.
Well, I'll go ahead. I have about a minute for you to answer, for all 4 of you to answer that.
I agree that the Commission is currently a very collegial body.
I agree.
I agree as well. But let me just take a second just to say that after having gone through the last few years, I'm extremely appreciative of what Congressman Terry's tried to do with this legislation. I think that it's appropriate for Congress to take a look at the legislative background of the agency, given recent events. And I agree with Commissioner Ossendorf that there are some aspects of the reorganization plan that probably require some clarification. I think you, however, have pointed out some things that could lead to unintended consequences, as Chairman McFarland said. So I think it's certainly something that is worth looking at, and I do think there's room for clarification.
I agree with Commissioner Magwood's comments, and I would just add two pieces here. One, I think the chairman needs to be able to be the chairman and exercise leadership role, and that he or she has to have appropriate authorities to do such. I also think that there are places where greater clarification would be helpful. And I believe that's the spirit of Congressman Terry's efforts in several cases here.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I just think that the Commission itself has the authority and the wherewithal to make those clarifications. Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I yield back.
Gentleman yields back for time. Chair, and I recognize the gentleman from Georgia, Mr. Gingrey, ranking member of my subcommittee, for 5 minutes. Vice Chair.
Mr. Chairman, thank you. Thank you very much. I'm very pleased to hear that the Commission is a collegial body, because indeed we are too, as you all know. Chairwoman McFarland, I understand you spoke last week to a conference in Japan where you indicated, and I quote, we have no ultimate plan for spent fuel disposition, end quote. I don't know if this statement reaches the depth of a selfie, but if there's no plan, what was the basis of the D.C. Circuit issuing a writ of mandamus compelling the agency to resume its review of Yucca Mountain?
I think I was referring in general to the fact that globally there is right now no high-level waste repository in any country. So I was speaking very broadly when I was making these statements at this workshop.
I understand. But if there's no plan, then what is the basis for our electricity ratepayers to pay $750 million to the federal government every year?
I think the court actually has overturned that for the moment.
Well, I assume, I don't assume, actually, I assure you, Madam Chairman, I assure you that there is a plan. There may be a few people in this town who want to pretend that there is no plan, but there is, and it's enshrined in a law called the Nuclear Waste Policy Act. And 335, and not just Republicans, 335 House members voted to fund that plan this summer. What I think we need to see from NRC is your plan for fully and faithfully complying with the law. And I would expect an agency that is statutorily mandated to complete an action, in this case, the license review, to have a plan for doing so. Failing to plan, Madam Chair, I know you would agree with this, failing to plan is planning to fail. Is the NRC preparing this integrated plan that would encompass all actions necessary in support of a final decision, including detailed schedule and resource estimates?
We are in the process of carrying out the staff is in the process of carrying out the order that I referred to that we issued on November 18th. I understand our staff is going to be providing the Commission with a plan to move forward to carry out the court's decision later this month. So we will look forward to receiving that.
Well, let me ask the same question of all the commissioners, starting from your right. Would you support preparation of such a plan? And if you would not, why not?
I do support the development of these types of estimates within the agency to inform, as we noted in our order, our future budget deliberations.
I understand you recuse, certainly. Mr. Egwood.
Yeah, to be perfectly honest, I think that we've been so focused on implementing the court's direction, we haven't taken the next step to really think seriously about where do we go from here. And I think you've raised a valid question. Actually, another commissioner and I were talking about this just yesterday in a very, very brief way. So I think it's something we'll have to take back and give a lot of thought to.
Mr. Ostendorf.
I personally do support preparing a plan to see what it takes to move forward.
The Commission has directed the staff to, and I quote here, complete the Safety Evaluation Report, SER, using the approach that was underway when work on the SER was suspended. That is, the staff should work on the completion of all remaining volumes concurrently, but issue each SER volume upon completion. These are my final two questions. Will that follow the previous schedule that was in place when the review was terminated? Madam Chairwoman?
The previous schedule that when it was terminated?
When it was terminated. Will you follow the previous schedule?
As I said, the staff is developing their plan to move forward. They're going to be giving that to us later this month.
Well, back then, Madam Chairwoman, Volume 3 was the next one scheduled for release. Can you tell the committee when we can expect to see that Volume 3?
We don't have that detail right now, and I don't want to say more because right now this issue is subject of pending motions before the commission and may be subject of legal action. So we can't go into great detail on this issue.
Mr. Chairman, I yield back. Thank you.
Gentleman yields back his time. Chair now recognizes the gentleman from Texas, Mr. Green, for 5 minutes.
Mr. Chairman, I'd like to take a minute because our colleague, Congressman Gingrey, I know lost his mom last week. It's the first time I've seen you, Phil, and I know all of us share your loss and your mom. And like I said, I haven't had a chance to talk to you about it, but I appreciate your friendship and what we do on the committee. With that, having been on both these subcommittees for a number of years, I appreciate the panel, both the chair and the members, because over the last few years that has not been the relationship between the chair and the members and the collegialists. Now I know where Congressman Terry is trying to go with his bill because it was going to try to solve a problem a lot of us perceived in hearings over the last few years, and I have some concern about the imperial chairman issue, and maybe we can look at that. But I just appreciate the partnership and the working relationship the chair you've instituted and the agreement that we have. I know it's an unusual way. We have an agency to do that with the power being in the chair so much. But Ms. McFarland, over the last few years, we've seen, we haven't expanded our nuclear power base, although we hope to do that. And frankly, I guess I want to go to some questions, though, about what we have done as compared to Fukushima, and I'll go to those directly. You discussed the NRC reactor oversight process in the 5 columns of an action matrix in your testimony. Column 1 consists of the best safety and security performance. Column 2 and 3 require successive increases in NRC oversight and enhanced inspection. Would you agree that increased oversight and enhanced inspection means that there may be safety or security issues that require the Commission's attention?
Certainly they require the staff's attention, yes, and the Commission overall, certainly.
Okay. You state that there are 78 reactors in column 1 and 14 reactors in column 2 and 7 in column 3. Would you agree that the majority of our nation's nuclear reactors are meeting the highest safety and security standards?
The majority of our nuclear reactors are operating safely, yes.
Recently, in the Federal Register, the NRC acknowledged that there are currently 56 rulemaking rankings underway at the Commission. Do you know how many of those relate to safety or security?
I'm not sure exactly. 56 rulemaking, they usually do relate to safety and security.
So
they may not all be around nuclear reactors. They might be around nuclear materials, too.
If the majority of our nuclear fleet is already meeting the highest standard, what new analysis or involving circumstances lead to these rules?
Operational experience.
Okay. Ms. McFarland, as you know, in 1998, the U.S. government breached its contractual obligations with respect to disposing of nuclear waste. Thus far, every challenge has been brought before the court system has agreed that the government must fulfill our obligation. CBO estimate that taxpayer liability related to the breach of the contract has reached approximately $12.3 billion. Additionally, the taxpayers have spent approximately $15 billion, give or take, on the development of Yucca Mountain. And finally, Yucca Mountain is designed to handle about 70,000 tons of waste. At our current levels, our nation would exceed Yucca's capacity even before it opens. In NRC Order CLI 1308, it was written that the Commission would take appropriations requests under advisement in the course of the agent's budgeting process. With $30 billion in taxpayer funding and liability and waste that exceeds capacity, why would the Commission not request funding for a licensing process for the new Yucca Mountain?
Well, we're as I said earlier, we're moving forward with the court's order, and any further budgeting decisions will be Commission decisions.
The courts determined the Commission must move forward. The administration determined that Yucca Mountain is not the answer. If the answer isn't Yucca Mountain, how do we meet these obligations by the court?
That's a policy decision that I'm going to let you all wrestle with.
Well, I think the House we could probably deal with it, but we do have some issues with the Senate. In February 2013, the Commission testified that restart a Yucca process and complete the safety evaluations, the SARE of the NRC would need approximately 6 to 8 months and is estimated $6.5 million. In September of 13, Commission stated that to complete the SARE, it required 12 months and estimated $8.3 million. In November, it was reported the NRC staff estimated a cost of $11.1 million. The last time the subcommittees addressed Yucca Mountain, we acknowledged that to complete the SARE, volumes 2 through 5 might require additional resources 6.5. Is 8.3 the correct number, and why has the estimate increased over $2 million over the last 6 months?
As we said in the order, the staff's estimate has changed as a result of the proceeding being suspended for a number of years. And saying any more on this topic is not appropriate because of the motion before the Commission.
Well, and I know if we provide guidance, Mr. Chairman, from the House side, hopefully the Senate would recognize there's a court decision we have to respond to. And we obviously, I know other countries, and I've been to other countries to see their nuclear waste facilities, and it would be nice if we actually led in that effort, even though some of our other countries are a little further ahead of us. So thank you, Mr. Chairman, for your courtesy. Appreciate the extra time.
Gentleman's time's expired. Chair now recognizes the very patient Mr. Terry from Nebraska for 5 minutes. I think he wants to weigh in on this a little bit.
Maybe. First, I'd like to say the issue, I think, with the NRC is the public has to have confidence in you. And there's been, I think we can universally agree that there was a breach in confidence because we couldn't trust the NRC at one point in time. And I really appreciate you creating a collegial atmosphere, or reestablishing, because if you aren't working together, I don't think you can truly be an effective body. So I appreciate you restoring some level of camaraderie and not a culture of distrust. On the other hand, it has been 33 years since Congress has really looked into the rules and procedures, and frankly, because of the breaches that occurred prior to your arrival, Chairman, I think it is legislative malpractice to not recognize that there's been, well, now we know, some holes in those procedures. And I think probably the heart of that is the misuse of emergencies. And the heart of this bill is really about emergencies. So I want to ask a couple of questions here. Hey, Morgan, would you lean forward? Appreciate that. So, do you believe that there should be a declaration of an emergency?
Well, first of all, Congressman, thank you for the...
I'll do a dingle. That's pretty much a yes or no question.
Okay. Well, first of all, I just want to compliment you on the work that you put into this bill and the thinking that you put into this bill. Of course, one should declare an emergency.
All right. Well, that's not in your rules and procedures, and so that's one of, I think, probably the most important part of this is just to say that the chair does have to physically say there's an emergency and not keep that from your fellow commissioners. Now, the bill says, and I kind of enjoyed some of the questions by my colleagues because they made it sound like you have to declare the emergency and then right away call the commissioners. The bill actually says 24 hours. Is that not enough? Is that too much time or too little time to notify the other four sitting at that desk that you have declared an emergency?
I think it really would depend on the particular situation. I don't know that we can imagine all the situations.
Can you imagine?
Come forward.
Okay, and let me go, because we actually then define in here what an emergency is, and that's just simply that it's a safety threat.
Or a security threat.
Or a security.
We also are responsible for the security at nuclear facilities, and I am a little concerned about the security language in the bill, which requires the NRC to wait for another federal agency to declare a security threat at a reactor
Well, I think
before
maybe
the
you're-
NRC can act.
I
The
think you're
NRC is
misreading.
responsible for security
Okay.
at reactors.
Well,
We practice this with our licensees.
all right. Well, then I disagree with that interpretation, but if you would like to work further on that, that's fine. Are you against the emergency provision?
In this bill?
Yeah.
Yes, I am.
And you said it will have unintended consequences. Can you tell me what the unintended consequences would be? Will you let me finish, please? Of having to notify the 4 people on your right and left, the 2 on the right and 2 on the left, that you've declared an emergency.
I've said earlier, previously before this body, and I pledge again, to let my colleagues know in the event of an emergency, and certainly let you all know, the oversight.
Well, then
know.
if you've pledged it, why? I think the next commissioner should have the same responsibilities. But until we change the rules, I don't know if the next person that takes over your role will be as responsible as you, and that's why your prior chairman has shown that we have a big hole in the procedures. And the next one may be as rogue, or as I think Mr. Green was kinder by saying imperial, but that's why we have to change the rules. And I don't think a 24-hour notice to your colleagues and to this committee, if there's a safety threat, is that extraordinary. I think it's pretty reasonable. And the other part of that is you do have the power to declare under this the emergency. It's only if it's more than 30 days where we want the commissioners to actually be involved. Before then, for 30 days, all you have to do is within 24 hours and say there's an emergency, and that's you're satisfied. And it's hard for me to get through my mind turning to your assistant and say, make sure we email our commissioners. That took 5 seconds for me to say, but that's extraordinary for you? I'm just having a hard time with that. Yield back.
Gentleman yields back his time. Chair now recognizes the gentlelady from California, Ms. Capps, for 5 minutes.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, and I thank you all on the Commission for being here today. As you know, I represent Diablo Canyon Nuclear Power Plant, which is owned and operated by PG&E. Diablo Canyon is a major contributor to our local economy and obviously plays an important role in our state's energy portfolio. But it also sits on 2 earthquake faults, the Hoskree and the Shoreline. So safety is obviously always a top priority. Now, every power plant must be built according to a safe shutdown earthquake SSE standard, as we know, which is the maximum ground shaking that key safety elements are designed to withstand so it can safely shut down. As a condition of Diablo Canyon's operating license, the NRC required its safety systems to be evaluated using industry standard evaluation calculations and tests to ensure that it could meet the SSE levels. But the NRC did not require the same industry standard calculations and tests to be used to evaluate the safe shutdown standards for an earthquake along the Hoskree Fault. In other words, there's a lot of new information since those standards were set, which was predicted to be stronger than the reactor was licensed to withstand. I believe that's sort of commonly understood now. And since then, of course, we have discovered a shoreline fault in the same region, which is even closer to the reactor and also not yet fully understood. It makes a lot of my constituents very nervous. To my knowledge, the NRC has still not required safety testing using the same industry standard methodology that originally required in its operating license. In other words, there's some inconsistency here and now. Dr. Michael Peck, the NRC's former senior resident inspector at Diablo Canyon, even filed a non-concurrence report with the NRC saying that the reactor was not in compliance with its license. Chairwoman McFarland, in light of Dr. Peck's expert opinion, what is the NRC doing to ensure that the reactor is in compliance with the seismic safety requirements of its operating license?
The Diablo Canyon nuclear power plant is in compliance with...
Well, he's written this report that's dissenting. I'd ask you to answer in light of that.
Right, and the NRC's view is that the Diablo Canyon plant is within compliance. that there are actually 3 design basis earthquakes. The design basis, the double design basis, as you mentioned, and also the Hosgri earthquake. When that was discovered in the 1980s, the plant was reevaluated to see if it could withstand that, and it can. When the shoreline fault,
I'm sorry,
it was reevaluated
to see if it can withstand the Hosgri.
The Hosgri, yes, and it can. And the shoreline fault was evaluated by independent analysis, and that fault is bounded by the design basis earthquakes. An earthquake that fault could produce is bounded by the design basis earthquake. So the plant is considered within compliance. But let me say that we've asked all nuclear power plants in the country to reevaluate their seismic hazard. And so Diablo Canyon is in the process of reevaluating their seismic hazard. And their seismic hazard reevaluation is due into the Commission in March of 2015.
Will this new evaluation of Diablo Canyon that they're doing themselves be required to prove that the reactor can withstand the stronger Hosgri and shoreline earthquakes? Are you using the same industry standard methodology required in the operating license for the safe shutdown earthquake?
We're using the most up-to-date methodologies to do the seismic hazard reevaluation.
Do you believe they fully incorporate you do believe that?
To the best of my knowledge, but I can certainly take this for the record and give you a more detailed answer.
Well, it is a complicated issue, and this is just a 5-minute question, but I wanted to make sure that you could provide me with a copy of Dr. Michael Peck's differing professional opinion. Are you able to do that, please?
I will
so that I could have a copy of it.
Yeah, I will have to check on that, but I will take your larger question for the record here and give you a more detailed answer.
Okay. Your response is rather troubling, particularly in light of the recent changes in NRC's transparency policies. I'm curious to know whether, this new policy of the fact that only the ranking member or the chairman are allowed to ask for information, how that affects your decision.
I want to be clear here. We haven't significantly changed our policy. We are going to be as responsive and as transparent as we ever were. And certainly when you have concerns about a reactor within your district, we are going to respond as completely as possible.
I appreciate this. And I know, Mr. Chairman, I just want to make one final comment, because I'm looking forward to getting these documents soon. This is of particular interest to my constituents. I'm pleased to hear that in response, that in light of the recent changes in the NRC's transparency policies, that you're still willing to get a response to us. But I am very troubled by these new policies that really preclude transparencies from members of a committee with oversight to be able to ask directly for information, both as a member of the committee and as the one with a nuclear plant in my district. I find the policy itself to be unacceptable, and that's with no offense to my good friends, the chairman and ranking member, but I should be able to freely address your committee, and it sounds like you are.
You still are.
I appreciate that.
But I hear your concerns.
All right. Thank you very much.
Gentlelady's time has expired. Chair, now we're going to the gentleman from Texas, Mr. Olson, for 5 minutes.
I thank the chair, and welcome to the commissioners. 77.9 miles from my house is the South Texas project. As you all know, there are 2 reactors there. Unit 1 celebrates its 25th anniversary this past August. South Texas project is in Hurricane Alley. And yet for 25 years now, they've provided safe, reliable power for Southeast Texas and our whole Gulf Coast. I want to follow up with some of the questions from Chairman Whitfield. My district also is a home to Fluor, a large construction company that's looking at making some small modular reactors using that technology. As you all know, these are smaller, more affordable reactors that could someday make new nuclear power available in more places. My first question is for you, Chairman McFarland. The certification of new reactors designed by the NRC is best described as deliberate, and that's good. But as this process goes, it's sometimes too deliberate. As Chairman Barton said, it takes on average 7 years. I know DOE has a role in this, but safety is critical. Can you tell me what has caused these delays in design certification in the past, and what can you, the NRC, do to keep the review of small reactor designs reasonable and timely?
Thanks for the question, Congressman. The design certification process is a two-way street, and as I mentioned before, we do need high-quality applications. And so what's often delayed the design certification process is questions that we have about the application because we didn't get a high-quality product to begin with. Now, to try to avert that, in the case of small modular reactors, we've been working with the potential applicants, telling them what they need to provide to us, and making sure that they clearly understand that. But maybe my colleagues would like to comment.
I was going to say, that's
well.
my question. Ms. Savanicki, is that close, please? Anything to add, ma'am?
I would note that some of the small modular reactor design certifications or designs that we're aware of are more innovative than others, and I think that where the design is less similar to something we've previously approved, it's likely that we're going to have a series of questions that we'll want to ask to assure ourselves of safety.
Commissioner Apostolakis, sir.
During the reviews, especially when the design has new aspects to it, technical issues arise that require response from the applicant and then an evaluation by the NRC staff. This happened with Westinghouse's AP1000, with General Electric's ESBWR, and these technical issues, unfortunately, are of the nature that they are not resolved within a week or 2 weeks or a month. So that's a cause for delay. I don't know what issues will come up when the SMRs are being reviewed. We'll have to see. But I think, 5 to 7 years is not an unreasonable time.
Yes, so I have to get Commissioner Magwood and Commissioner Ostendorf have your answers for the record, because I got one more question I want to ask. And it's for you. I want to call you Captain Ostendorf, because as a guy who spent his Navy career chasing submarines, it's great to welcome a submariner here. And as a fellow graduate of the University of Texas Law School, welcome, welcome, welcome. I know you'll be looking forward this weekend, the football game that's going to happen between your alma mater, the Naval Academy, and the Army, West Point. And with all due respect to the chairman here, we're looking for 12 straight victories.
Go Navy.
Yeah, there we go. But as you know, I'm a strong supporter of nuclear power, and we're coming from a state that needs more baseline power. We need more nuclear power plants. I mentioned South Texas. They've been trying to get 2 reactors for about a decade. Stops and starts, not because of all of you done. There's been some things happening back home in Texas. But I'm excited because we're building 2 new plants there in Georgia and South Carolina. I want to ask you, Captain, what have you learned with these new plants? Because it's happened. It's been a long, long time since we've authorized new reactors. What have you learned, good and bad, going forward so I can help South Texas?
Well, one thing that I'll comment on, I go back to my Navy experience. 33 years ago, I was on my second submarine being built in Newport News Shipyard, had responsibilities for supervising the testing of the propulsion plant at Newport News Shipyard. And this was the 25th submarine being built at this time. This is 1980 USS Atlanta. And for the 25th submarine being built, the same design, every week there were still new issues that came up about constructability. Where does this pipe hanger go? Where do you put this mount? How do you do this particular welding technique in this orientation? And for a very mature program for submarine construction at the time, we were continuing to learn lessons routinely. And so we should not be surprised if at Vogel, Watts Bar, Summer, and any SMR constructions, that as we go through that process, that we learn new lessons, because there will be some issues that come up that had not been anticipated.
Well, that amount of time, I want to close by saying, go Navy, beat Army. I yield back.
Gentleman is out of order. Chair now recognizes the Chairman of Miners, Mr. Dingell, for 5 minutes.
Mr. Chairman, I thank you for your courtesy. I commend you for the hearing. I welcome you, Chairman McFarland, and members of the commission. I want to thank you for your recent response to the letter sent by myself and a number of my colleagues on both sides of the aisle asking the Commission to complete work on the safety evaluation report for Yucca Mountain. I'm encouraged by the recent order to finish the SCR and look forward to its completion. Now, Madam Chairman, as I just mentioned, on November 18, the NRC ordered the staff to complete work on the safety evaluation report for Yucca Mountain, and that such work would take approximately 12 months. This time frame made a few assumptions, and I'd like to ask you some questions about those assumptions on page 11, footnote 38 of the Commission's order. First, will the Commission of the SCR be given a high priority, yes or no?
It will be given a high priority.
Now, Madam Chairman, approximately how long do you anticipate it will take to gather the necessary key technical reviewers?
As I was able to say earlier, we're expecting a plan from the staff on moving forward on this later this month. But saying any more on this issue is not appropriate because we have some pending motions before the Commission on our order.
Could you submit some quick and dirty response to the committee on that particular point? Now, Madam Chairman, is your staff developing a plan on how to move towards completion of the SCR? Yes or no?
Yes, we are.
When will such plan be completed? Can you give us a rough answer on that, please?
The plan to move forward will be completed later this month.
It is my understanding that Nye County, Nevada, has appealed the SCR order. Does the NRC have sufficient funds to complete both the SCR and to respond to Nye County's appeal?
Well, certainly all litigation matters on Yucca Mountain come from the nuclear waste funds. In terms of specific amounts of money, because of this motion before us, I can't go into any more detail.
Well, I have my great doubt that you will be able to do so, and as soon as you can tell us that you don't, or you do, or you need additional money for this, it would be appreciated if you would communicate that to us, because we want you to have the resources you need to do the job you have to do. Now, Madam Chairman, approximately how much is it going to cost the NRC to fully respond to Nye County's appeal?
I do not know.
If you get some loose time when you get back to the Commission, would you see what you could tell us on that for the record? Now, Madam Chairman, in responses to questions on the record from Chairman Shimkus from the July 24, 2012 hearing, commissioners who attended that hearing expressed general support for the internal commission procedures implemented in 2011. It's my understanding that these procedures are advised every 2 years, and the Commission is currently in the process of further revising. Is that correct?
That's correct.
Now, I'm gonna try to give it. You're Polish, aren't you, Commissioner?
The name is Slovak. My grandfather came to the Upper Peninsula of Michigan to work in the iron mines there from Slovakia.
Svinsky.
Well, I've Americanized it to Sviniki, yes.
I like the Slavic much better. In any event, Commissioner, welcome. It's always good to see a University of Michigan graduate. In your QFR response, you stated that the Commission was gaining operational experience from the 2011 internal procedures. Now that they've been in place for 2 years, do you believe the internal procedures and the review process allow the Commission to properly carry out its duty in a collegial and collaborative way? Yes or no?
Yes, and we are.
Now, would the other commissioners please give us a yes or no answer on that too? Sir?
Yes.
Madam Chairman?
Yes.
Sir?
Yes. Yes.
Now, do the commissioners believe that the current ICP are working? Would you each answer yes or no, if you please?
Yes, but we do have the procedures under a biennial review process, so we're always looking where they might be improved.
Sir?
Yes and no.
Yes.
Sir?
Yes. Yes, but I agree with Commissioner Svinicki's comment that they are under review again.
Now, for all the commissioners, do you believe that every commissioner's concerns and input have been considered during the current ICP process? In other words, have each of you had your considerations and concern considered in the process? Yes or no?
Yes, my colleagues evaluated my modifications and approved or disapproved them.
Yes.
Yes, we considered each other's.
Sir?
Yes, we all work together on it.
Yes.
Now, if a commissioner had suggested a change to the ICP, do you each believe that such a suggestion would be considered in good faith? Yes or no?
Yes.
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 I hope that in no way did you feel distressed at those questions, but I want to see to it that the commission gets the fullest support of this committee in doing its responsibilities and in having a harmonious process, because God knows you're having enough trouble doing your job down there because of outside interference of all sorts. Thank you, Mr. Chairman, for your courtesy.
Gentleman's time expired. Chair now recognizes the gentleman from Illinois, Mr. Kinzinger, for 5 minutes.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, and thank you all for being here today. Earlier this year, a letter was sent to the NRC raising concerns about the staff proposal to mandate filter systems. As it happens, the proposal not only failed a cost-benefit analysis in which there were serious concerns in regards to an understated cost estimate, but the Advisory Committee on Reactor Safeguards, your expert advisory body, also disagreed with the proposal's approach. In the response letter that was received, the NRCC stated it has followed its process for ensuring that a sufficient basis exists for imposing regulatory requirements. Chairman McFarland, would you agree that the current NRC practice states that a sufficient basis for imposing regulatory requirements means that the change has been shown to be necessary for adequate protection of public health and safety, or as required by the backfit rule?
Yes, that's correct.
Would any other commissioners like to comment on that? Any of them?
I agree.
Okay. The issue here is that the NRCC staff have tried to override the quantitative analysis related to filtered vents in order to escape a challenge under the NRC's backfit rule by recommending that the Commission vote to issue an order. Chairman McFarland, isn't that process normally reserved for matters that are necessary for adequate protection of public health and safety?
I don't believe the staff tried to override the backfit rule or the cost-benefit analysis. I think they did a thorough cost-benefit analysis according to the information they had.
Is that the opinion of all the commissioners?
I don't know.
Sir.
I want to comment, Congressman. Thank you for the question. I think our staff did an outstanding job of presenting a very difficult issue to the Commission for our decision, and I don't think they tried to circumvent or go around any rule. I think there's certain matters that require judgment. They teed it up to the Commission. We made a decision. And we're moving forward. I applaud our staff for their work in this effort.
Well, I'm not going to take all my time, actually. I'd like to close by offering my support for Congressman Terry's NRC reform legislation. My friend and I are working on language to limit the Commission's use of orders for only urgent and significant safety needs. A solid line must be issued to ensure discipline in the agency's processes so that the regulations can provide some actual stability to the issues. With that, Mr. Chairman, I'll yield back.
Gentleman, yield back his time. The chair now will recognize Ms. Castor from Florida for 5 minutes.
Well, good morning, Chairman McFarland and Commission members. A decommissioning plan was recently submitted for the Crystal River Nuclear Power Plant in Florida. It's a distressing situation all the way around because the utility attempted to repair the plant. They exacerbated problems resulting in cracks in the containment walls. The repair costs soared, and so the utility chose to shut it down. It's gotten a lot of attention in Florida, and especially among ratepayers, because they are on the hook because of the law in Florida that said ratepayers pay in advance for constructing the plants, and now they're going to be on the hook for those costs, and then some of the cost of shutting it down without generating 1 kilowatt hour of electricity. So this is an important lesson for states around the country to have safeguards if you're going to proceed to have an advanced recovery fee. So the utility has chosen safe storage as the decommissioning option, which will, they estimate, will cost $1.2 billion. And this will proceed now over 60 years to 2074. Could you please review at this point in time, now that you've received the decommissioning plan, what the responsibilities are of the NRC in review of that plan and public comment?
Sure. It's the NRC maintains an oversight role throughout the entire decommissioning of the facility. We continue to inspect the facility, especially during active decommissioning. After we receive the plan from the licensee, we will hold a public meeting and discuss how the licensee decides to move forward and accept public comment on this. We also strongly encourage our licensees to form community advisory boards for decommissioning process. And in fact, I did meet with the licensees yesterday and personally encouraged them to do this.
Terrific. Now, there are other plants around the country that are currently in safe storage. I believe 3 Mile Island is. Name a few others that are.
Indian Point 1. Zion was in safe storage. They're now actively decommissioning. So
in your experience with these plants that are decommissioned and in safe storage, what is the likelihood that the $1.2 billion cost estimate at this time will remain static, and what's the likelihood that the cost for decommissioning and attention to the plant over time will increase?
I'm not that familiar with the costs over long periods of time, so let me take that for the record.
Okay. Do any of the other commissioners have a comment on that, on the likelihood? Okay. On another topic, the Terry bill proposes to legislate how official international travel by all commissioners is approved. Some might argue that the provision falls into the category of micromanaging the commission, but if the majority intends to legislate in this area, we need to have a better understanding of the commissioners' travel. According to information provided by the commissioners, some of them have been traveling abroad quite a bit. Now, some of this is to be expected in the wake of the Fukushima disaster. Commissioner Magwood spent 52 days in 2013 on official foreign travel to Europe, Asia, and South America. That's 2 months of international travel. It seems like quite a lot. More than 100 days of traveling abroad on official business over the last 2 years. And Commissioner Stanicki traveled for 43 days this year internationally. This seems to be bordering on the excessive, and I think we're going to need an accounting here, especially when the primary responsibilities, of course, are in the United States. Now, I think it's reasonable. You've got to understand what's happening in the field internationally. But since we're expected to mark up legislation that addresses this travel, I'd like each of the commissioners to provide for the record an accounting of their international travel and an explanation of why it's worth the hundreds of thousands of taxpayer dollars that it costs. And thank you. I yield back the rest of my time.
Generally yields back her time. The chair now recognizes the gentleman from Virginia, Mr. Griffith, for 5 minutes.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Appreciate you all being here. And as I have said before, one of my first experiences was while there was a fight going on. And so I do appreciate what all of you have done to create an atmosphere of collegiality. So I do appreciate that. In regard to Mr. Terry's bill, I happen to agree with him that it doesn't seem like it's too onerous. Perhaps language can be worked out. Madam Chair, if you will work with him on language to make it straight. But when I was a kid, there was a TV show, Lost in Space, and the robot would say, "Danger, Will Robinson, danger."
I remember it well.
And it seems to me there ought to be some app or way that you can quickly get a message out that would say, "Danger, Will Ostendorf, danger, Will." I would ask you as well in regard to the Inspector General's reports, the one on June 6th, 2011, and then also the one on June 26th, 2012. Have you had an opportunity now to read those? Last time you had just gotten started, and so
yes, I have.
You have read those, and And that, I think, is the impetus behind the Terry bill, is that in both of those reports it points out that there were some conflicts over what information could be given to the other members of the commission by the chairman, and that led to a lot of the angst that was going on prior to your arrival. So I think that while I support the bill, I'm sure that Mr. Terry will work with you in regard to working out some of the glitches that are there, that he's trying to do what's right, you're trying to do what's right. I'm sure y'all can get that worked out. Now, according to NRC practice, new requirements must be shown to be necessary for adequate protection of public health and safety, or be justified by a cost-benefit analysis as required by the backfit rule. I'd like to ask the clerk to put up the chart, average fleet implementation cost compared to NRC estimates. Do you all have that? There you go. When I look at this chart in the context of cost-benefit analysis, I wonder how the use of more accurate cost estimates might have impacted the analysis done in support of new requirements. Madam Chair or any other member, do you have any comment on that?
I'm not sure where your numbers come from. I'd be happy to examine them in more detail and and get back to you on that.
If you could do that for the record, I would appreciate it very much. Do you have any plans for undertaking any review of previous cost-benefit analysis to determine, and I recognize you don't know where these numbers came from, but if you have any plans to determine if there's more accurate cost estimates that might be done, assuming these numbers to be accurate? Do you have any plans to do that, ma'am?
You know, in general, I think our staff does a good job with their cost-benefit analyses, and they rely on the best available information.
Yes, ma'am.
If I could supplement the chairman's answer by noting that the commission has heard evidence of great disparities in the cost estimates, and so we did, as a commission, direct the NRC staff to work to find case studies and have, instead of arguing about estimates before the fact, to take a case where we had estimated a cost and the industry's already implemented it, look at what were those actual costs of that particular item. There are some sensitivities on the industry side to sharing some of this business information, but we asked for volunteers to perform what we were calling case studies and looking at some of our regulations. So that way we could look at their actual cost to implement versus our forecasts, in the hope and with the objective of maybe improving the accuracy of our cost estimating.
Yes, ma'am. Thank you about that. On a separate topic, there have been, as you all previously talked about, 4 nuclear plants permanently shut down in the past year. 1 more will shut down next year, and reports persist that there may be others. As a result of the decommission process, this has garnered a lot of public interest, but I'm particularly concerned about the money's coming in. You talked about the constant money, and obviously there's some other money. But decommissioning plants don't pay as much in NRC fees as operating plants. That is correct, is it not?
That's correct.
And so then the question is, as these plants are closing down and your funds are decreasing from what they have been paying as operating plants, how is the NRC going to handle the decreases in funds?
Operating plants are required to establish a decommissioning fund, which they set aside for decommissioning, and we evaluate the amount of money that they have in that fund and their plans for that fund every 2 years.
But I mean, over time, after they've decommissioned, if you have fewer plants, there's going to be less money coming in. Have you all started making plans to deal with that reduction in monies?
I think we are okay right now, but let me get back to you on the record with more detail on this.
I appreciate that very much, and again, thank you for your testimony here today to all of you, and I yield back.
Gentleman yields back his time. Chair now recognizes the ranking member of the full committee, Mr. Waxman, for 5 minutes.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chairman. In my opening statement, I expressed serious concerns about NRC's new policy for responding to congressional requests for non-public documents. I'd like to read the previous policy. Quote, "The Commission's general practice is to provide sensitive documents requested by members of its congressional oversight committees. It will also provide sensitive documents to other members of Congress when the documents address matters pertaining to his or her state or district," end quote. I thought that was a reasonable policy. It enabled the members of this committee and members with reactors in their districts to obtain the documents necessary for them to conduct oversight. The new policy is very different. NRC will only provide non-public documents to the chairman and ranking member of a committee, and it will provide documents only after pursuing alternatives that do not involve producing requested documents. Chairman McFarland, do you acknowledge this committee's constitutional responsibility to provide oversight of the executive branch?
Of course.
And do you concede that in the absence of a claim of executive privilege, NRC has no legal basis to withhold requested non-public documents from Congress?
Not from its oversight committees and the chairman.
The new policy also provides each commissioner the opportunity to review documents before they are turned over to Congress and to object to producing specific documents. Chairman McFarland, this policy creates a potential for significant delay in responding to oversight requests. How much time are commissioners given to review documents before they are produced to Congress?
I think we certainly want to maintain cognizance of what documents are going in which direction, and the decision to produce documents or how we will be responsive, shall I say, is a commission decision. And of course we will operate with the most expediency possible in being responsive to our oversight committees.
Well, I have serious questions about allowing individual commissioners to object to producing specific documents to Congress. The NRC's policy does not explain what a legitimate basis for such an objection might be, and in the absence of a claim of executive privilege, there's no legal basis for withholding the documents. Chairman McFarland, do you think individual commissioners should have the right to prevent documents from being provided to Congress even when there is no legal basis for withholding these documents?
I think, and certainly not. And this, again, I just want to be clear, this is moving forward with any kind of document production is a commission decision.
Well, when Congress requests documents, we should get those documents. For some particularly sensitive documents, we need to have discussions about how to protect certain information while meeting Congress's oversight needs.
Exactly.
But I fear this new policy is much too restrictive. Would you commit to thinking through the concerns that we're raising today with your colleagues and to consider making changes to the policy to address these concerns?
Absolutely, I'll consider your concerns.
Thank you. And I'd like to ask the same question of the other members of the Commission. Will you commit to thinking through these concerns raised today and to consider making changes to address them?
Yes.
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 I thank you. That's very helpful, and I'll look forward to further communications with you. Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Yield back my time.
Gentleman yields back his time. Chair now recognizes the Vice Chairman of the Energy and Air Quality Subcommittee, Mr. Scalise, for 5 minutes.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Appreciate you here having this hearing. Appreciate all of you being back with us today. And I know back in February when we had our last hearing on the post-Fukushima requirements, I had asked a few questions. I want to go back to those because I haven't gotten those back. Maybe y'all have that information. If we can first pull up the slide that on cumulative effects that we had talked about at the last hearing. Yeah, that slide there I had raised just to show the timeline of regulatory actions for the average owner of 4 plants. And I pointed out how these are a lot of new requirements in addition to what is already needed for somebody to operate a plant at the highest level of security. And so as you look at the slide, and if you look down in the, I think go to the next slide because we've got another slide with even more requirements. And if you'll notice in the bottom, there's this little box in the bottom right corner that said that this slide still doesn't even reflect the Tier 2 and 3 Fukushima items that will be coming. And that's one of the things I asked about. I asked how many of those there are. We were hearing around 40. There wasn't a number that y'all could give me then, but can you give me a number now at how many we're talking about?
How many?
In addition to all of this.
Tier 3 requirements? Those are
3.
still under discussion at the Commission. We are not yet considering some of the Tier 3 requirements. We'll see if they will become requirements. We haven't decided.
Do you
yet.
have a number yet that you can give
No.
as a ballpark? When will that come out, and when is the plan for that to happen?
The number of items that we will be considering?
Yes.
I can give you that number for the record.
Because I asked for that in February, and you said you would give me that for the record, and I still haven't received that from February. When then
I
can
apologize
expect to get
for that.
Can
We
you
will
give me
give it to you with the, as soon as we can.
before next February, hopefully?
Before next February, yes.
That's good. We're making progress here. When we were talking about the cumulative effects, this is an issue that the NRC staff agrees can potentially, quote, can potentially distract licensee or entity staff from executing other primary duties that ensure safety or security. And so, again, I would emphasize as you're coming up with whatever that number is going to be, 30, 40, 50 new requirements, when you look at that chart, and those are things that are already being done, and I think we've seen our facilities have a very high level of security. We sure don't want to be putting things in place that would actually take away from their ability to keep that high level of security when they're already doing a lot of things that are important and effective. I do want to go now to the next slide because cost-benefit analysis is something that's real important too. When you're putting these items together that you're putting together, with each of these you would attach, I would imagine, some cost-benefit analysis to show what the cost is, because at the end of the day, it's ratepayers, it's hardworking taxpayers that will pay for whatever proposals would come forward, and it's always been a requirement that you attach that. If you look here, this shows a history of the NRC's estimates when you come up with specific rules, and you can go through, there's a number of rules there that we've seen what initially was your cost estimate at NRC, and then ultimately what the true cost was. With the, an estimate's nice until you actually find out how it happens in the real world. And just to use these, if you look the low end, you were 347% off on that cost estimate. On the high end, you were 1,449% off on your estimate. And each time the estimate was lowballed. It wasn't like sometimes you're high, sometimes you're low. In all cases, it seemed, I don't know if y'all were lowballing the numbers just to make it look like it wasn't going to have that much of an impact on ratepayers, but at the end of the day, when you look at the real-world impacts, it's very dramatic how far off y'all have been. And maybe if I can ask everybody on the panel here, what are y'all doing to fix this? I mean, this is, when you talk about accountability, if you're off that much in the same way, you're not, again, it's not, everything kind of factors out. If you're doing it, maybe you got good modeling. Sometimes you're a little high. Sometimes every time you're lowballing the numbers in a dramatic way, you're off. And ratepayers pay this. Taxpayers, families that are struggling are paying these costs. And if you come up with a rule and say it's only going to cost this, and it ends up costing 1,449% more, that's something that we ought to know before you put that cost on ratepayers. So if I can ask everybody, just going down the line, if you can address this problem.
The Commission is aware of some of these disparities and has directed the NRC staff to solicit for industry volunteers who would be willing to provide their business information regarding actual costs after the fact. So instead of comparing...
So in addition to all the other requirements you're making them do, you're going to ask them to fix this for you? Or
well, we could not compel the provision of this business information by the industry, so we asked the industry if they were interested in volunteering. Because of some of these disparities, we have gotten a very energetic response that they would like to show us some of the detailed cost estimates so that we could work towards the objective of improving our cost estimating ability by looking retrospectively at how much we were off on some of these and what was the cause of it.
The Commission has directed the staff to reevaluate and look again at the methodology that they are using for cost-benefit calculations. And I believe when we receive the staff's paper, this kind of slide will be very important to consider and ask questions why this is happening and see whether the staff will actually have found the reasons for this disparity.
I agree with my colleagues.
I agree with what my colleagues have said. I would add that the fact that we launched this effort to do these case studies indicates that that many of us were concerned, we didn't see these particular numbers, but we're concerned with the cost estimating situation. It is very important to get this as close as possible, and I, for one, would like to see us do much better.
I'll just add to my Commissioner colleague comments that our process in working with industry, we encourage industry to provide their own estimates to us, and our staff considers them.
And I think in many of these cases, especially I'm going to point out the one in the middle, the 10 CFR 73 security, because I've had discussions with industry and our staff in this area. I think both sides, both NRC and industry, did not fully understand the complexity of some of these procurements of CCTV systems, motion detector, other security type aspects. So I think it's a two-way street here. We are not going to pretend to be experts as an agency in these cost estimate matters by ourselves. We need industry's help. And I think both sides have recognized the need to do better and work together.
All right, obviously we've got to get that better. Thank you, Mr. McFarland, especially. Look forward to getting that information by February. And Mr. Chairman, with that, you back to balance my time.
Gentleman yields back his time. Chair now recognizes the gentleman from New York, Mr. Engel, for 5 minutes.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, and thank you all for being here. Thank you for the job you're doing. In many ways, it's a very thankless job, but obviously a very important one, and we appreciate it, even though we may have some policy differences from time to time. Chairman McFarland, we've discussed Indian Point in New York in the past, and I want to revisit it again. It's one of the most serious issues facing the New York metropolitan region, and I want to urge continued vigilance from the NRC. Indian Point has an operational history that's been plagued by serious questions, unplanned shutdowns, leaking fuel pools, and inadequate emergency notification and response systems. All members of Congress, and I am one, representing the county in which Indian Point is sited, have called for its closure, as well as our governor as well. So it's not something, obviously, that we take lightly. Particularly concerning are the changes that H.R. 3132 would make to the NRC's emergency authorities and response structure. I know others on this committee share my concerns of some of the inadequacies of the response structure brought forth in this legislation. You've heard it. But I would like it if you could address some of those concerns. Under current law, the chairman of the NRC holds the authorities necessary to save lives and manage disaster. The changes in H.R. 3132, in my opinion, would have the NRC governing crisis by committee, and we all saw how poorly that worked at Fukushima. So I'm told, and correct me if I'm wrong, before the chairman could declare an emergency, you would have to notify the fellow commissioners, the relevant congressional committees, and the general public. The facility could well be on its way to a meltdown. So I'd like to hear from you how you foresee this legislation impacting your ability to manage a potential crisis, specifically in a major metropolitan area like New York.
I think that the commission procedures are adequate at the agency. I think the commission is operating well, operating collegially, and I don't see any need to alter or change the existing procedures, especially with regard to emergency powers.
Thank you. Would anyone else care to comment? If not, I'll move on. Chairman McFarland, I'd like to also ask you, in your testimony, you mentioned the efforts the NRC has been undergoing to determine what regulatory action is required to the expedited transfer of spent fuel to dry cask storage. I've been particularly interested in that for years, have a bill that does it, and I understand the Commission's evaluating staff assessments and expects a proposal by early 2014. We're all aware of the risks from spent fuel in storage pools that can and that it can be reduced by moving some of it to dry cask. So can you elaborate on how the NRC is prioritizing the dry cask storage of spent fuel rods, as well as any hurdles that might remain for the implementation of this safer storage system?
We are now in the process of considering whether to require expedited transfer of spent nuclear fuel from the pools at reactors to dry cask storage. And the Commission will be having a Commission meeting on this in early January. We have a few papers from the staff that address this issue, and so it's an area of active consideration.
Well, I thank you for that. You know, as I mentioned, I've been concerned about it for a while, and I'm very happy that you're moving forward on it. Let me ask you my last question. Mr. Terry's bill chips away at the authority of the NRC chairman in a nuclear emergency. As we mentioned, bill says the chairman again can declare an emergency only in response to an imminent safety or security threat at a facility in the U.S. or involving nuclear materials directly related by the Commission. Chairman, do you think it makes sense to limit your emergency authority to events involving U.S.-based facilities and materials? And are there scenarios in which events in other countries could trigger an emergency in the United States or threaten U.S. citizens? I'm told that most of Canada's nuclear power plants are in Ontario near the U.S. border, near my home state of New York. And I'm also told that last week thieves stole a shipment of radioactive cobalt-60 in Mexico, which is an incident that could have had implications for the United States.
I think the chair needs flexibility to respond to an emergency wherever it is. In particular, in terms of foreign countries, as you point out, Canada has nuclear power plants that are relatively near our border that may pose an emergency for the U.S. I would also like to point out that the United States has military personnel in a number of countries that may be near nuclear facilities. If there's an emergency with one of those nuclear facilities, I think the U.S. government would probably want the Nuclear Regulatory Commission to have a full understanding of the emergency occurring. And so I think we have to make sure we have flexibility to respond to situations in which U.S. citizens may be at risk.
Thank you very much. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Gentleman's time expired. Now to show that we have multiple branches of the service, I turn to Colonel Johnson from the great state of Ohio.
Well, thank you, Mr. Chairman. And it was only the Air Force, but that's okay. I'm good. All the services are important. And I want to thank the panel for being here with us this morning. I got a few comments before I get to my question, and then I'll ask it to each of you. We've heard a lot this morning about budgets and costs, and when it comes to matters that are truly necessary for the protection of public health and safety, of course, costs shouldn't be necessarily the driving factor. However, I'm concerned that the NRC and the industry are in a pattern of ever-increasing costs, chasing ever smaller increments in safety gain. If I could ask the clerk to put up the slide of NRC's nuclear reactor safety budget versus licensing action. This slide shows how the NRC's nuclear safety budget has grown over the last decade. But I want to show you another slide, spending on selected cost categories, that shows how the industry's regulatory costs have grown just since 2005. That red line shows the percentage increase of regulatory capital expenditures compared to what the industry spent in 2005. So that distinct red peak shows that regulatory expenditures in 2012 were about 230% of what they were in 2005. The spending has now leveled off at about twice what the industry spent in 2005. I'm guessing as the cost of the NRC's post-Fukushima requirements are incurred, this line will trend upward again. I understand one utility has estimated their post-Fukushima cost to be $400 million. That's $0.4 billion. That's a lot of money. So the NRC incurs costs in establishing new regulatory requirements. Right now there are 56 rulemakings listed on the regulations.gov site. The industry incurs costs to implement the requirements, and then the NRC incurs more costs approving and overseeing the industry's implementations. This seems to be a self-reinforcing cycle of regulatory burden. Not only do I question whether this is sustainable over the long term, I'm concerned about whether the safety gains are commensurate with these costs. The NRC's principles of good regulation include reliability, which states that, and I quote, "Once established, regulation should be perceived to be reliable and not justifiably in a state of transition, and should be promptly, fairly, and decisively administered so as to lend stability to the nuclear operational and planning processes." Nuclear energy makes a vital contribution to our energy security. It's a pillar in our energy profile. One utility has already cited regulatory burden as a factor in their decision to close a plant prematurely. For plants whose economic viability is threatened, this increasing regulatory burden is a factor that can't be ignored when considering whether to keep operating. Decommissioning shouldn't be the only option that provides regulatory stability. I think this situation calls for strong leadership from the commissioners. Now, for the question, and I'd like to go down and have each of you answer, what do you think the NRC should do to stabilize this situation and restore some stability to the regulatory environment?
Well, I think that the Commission's approach to its post-Fukushima actions does reflect and take into account a number of the concerns that you've just expressed. For example, when presented with a long list of potential areas for regulatory action, the Commission itself took and prioritized those actions into those that would provide the greatest safety benefit, and we acted on those first. So the estimate of how much that red line would go up on your graph once the post-Fukushima actions are completed and all fully implemented is, I think some of the costs will be loaded into the early years because we have acted first on those things that have the greatest benefit to safety. And for the remainder of the actions, we need to strike the right balance between the probability of some of these extreme events and the need to take regulatory action on them.
Sir?
I must say I was a little bit disturbed by several slides that were shown today regarding cost. So I will go back and try to understand better what the reasons are. But I agree with Commissioner Svinicki's comments, but also in my opening statement I mentioned a few things that the agency is doing now to deal with the so-called cumulative effects of regulation. So I believe the Commission is aware of these problems, and perhaps we need to do more. So I don't know yet what else we need to do.
Commissioner, I'm going to let you go last if that's okay. So let's go to Mr. Magwood.
Thank you. I echo both Commissioner Postlak and Commissioner Svinicki. I mean, I would also add that as we go through the effort of looking at each one of these regulations, we do look at them in the context of what's necessary. I think each of us, of course, weighs that differently. And if something's not necessary, we don't approve it.
But, the slides indicate that hasn't worked up until now.
And there are many things that have been proposed that the Commission has not approved, and we've been pretty aggressive about that. So in my view, running nuclear power plants is not for the faint of heart, and we have to be able to meet regulatory requirements, and the requirements we put forward, I think, are appropriate. That said, I think, and Commissioner Postlakis alluded to this earlier, that there is a very useful, very important conversation taking place within the agency and with the agency and the industry talking about prioritization of regulations. And this is something I think that if it's successful would enable us to look at regulations in a more holistic manner at each site. And that's really, I think, the path of the future, and that's how you would best address these issues.
Mr. Chairman, I know we're considerably over time, but I would like each panel member to have a chance to answer if you would indulge us. Sir?
Thank you for the question. I'll just agree with my colleagues' comments and then maybe add two other thoughts. One of them is that and Commissioner Magwood mentioned it, we have disapproved staff-recommended enhancements to regulations.
I'm sure you have, but what we're talking about here are the facts that are in the cost and the gains.
I understand. I'm just telling you, and I'll look at specifically in our post-Fukushima decision-making. And perhaps we need to do a better job of coming by to see you and explain these, but we do post in all of our written notation votes are public. We explain in great detail every individual commissioner as to what decision we have reached and why. And you could go look, I'll just highlight one decision, the external filter decision from earlier in 2013, where the Commission spent a great deal of time looking at the pros and cons, the cost-benefit analyses, and came to a decision that did not require installation of an external filtered vent, but gave industry more latitude to develop filtering strategies. So I think there's examples there. We perhaps need to communicate it better.
And I agree that there are probably some things that you have done very well, but in all due respect, what you are describing are things that you have done that have put us.
So my colleague is causing us to be very patient.
If you could.
If you would, can you, as briefly as you can?
I'll keep it short.
Thank you.
I agree with my colleagues in the statements they've made. I do think that we are cognizant of the cost-benefit analysis, but I just want to remind you that the Atomic Energy Act requires us to not consider costs when the NRC determines that a given regulatory action is required for the adequate protection of nuclear facilities. And that was the case with a number of the orders given post-Fukushima.
I thank you, Mr. Chairman, for your indulgence as well as the committee. Thank you.
The gentleman's time has expired. The chair now recognizes my colleague, my friend, my congressional classmate, the gentlelady from Colorado, Mr. Gett, for 5 minutes.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chairman. Good to see you in fine form today. I'm happy to see all 5 commissioners here today, just as everyone else said. And I just have a few questions. Commissioner Spinicki, you were on the commission in 2010. Is that correct?
Yes.
I just want to get a little recent history clear. And since you were there, I want to start with you. In that year, in 2010, the DOE filed a motion with the NRC to withdraw the Yucca Mountain license application. Is that correct?
Yes, I believe so. I'm having to go from my memory on some of these dates.
But the NRC licensing board denied the motion, and the commission sustained the licensing board's denial of the application. Is that correct?
Yes.
But then after the denial of DOE's motion, the NRC did not continue to review the Yucca application because of budgetary limitations. Is that correct?
The sequence of events may be a little bit different after the commission sustained the licensing board. It may have been that there was some time that the staff worked to kind of have what we call an orderly closeout of activities. So they may not have happened exactly concurrently.
Okay. Chairman McFarland, what were the budgetary limitations that were involved with the NRC's ceasing of reviewing the Yucca applications? Do you know?
I wasn't chairman then, so I...
And you don't know?
I don't know, but I can take that for the record and try to get the answer for you.
Okay. Now, since that point, the courts have ordered the NRC to continue that review, and you're now complying with those orders. Is that correct?
That is correct.
Now, you've got about $11 million. This kind of goes to Mr. Dingell's questions that he was asking. And my staff tells me that you have about $11 million remaining in the Yucca accounts, and your staff estimates that it will cost about that much to finish the report. Is that correct?
To finish the safety evaluation report, not the licensing.
The safety evaluation. That's right. And I just want to say I would encourage the NRC to keep to those timelines set and to finish the safety evaluation report, because it looks like we've got the money and it's ongoing, and I think it's important to have that. So I just wanted to ask one more question, kind of following up on what Mr. Engel was talking about, which is the bill that we're talking about today. And as a number of folks have discussed, the chairman of the commission under this bill would not be able to exercise emergency authority without consulting with congressional committees, other commissioners, and the public. And like my colleagues, I'm kind of worried about how this would work in a crisis. And one thing nobody has asked you, maybe Madam Chair, this would be a good thing for you to talk about, is if we learned any lessons from Fukushima about what kind of quick response we need to have in a crisis. What lessons have we learned from Fukushima?
Well, we've learned many lessons, but in
this particular context.
In this particular context, I think it's important for there to be a person who is in leadership, who can make decisions very quickly. I think that's one of the lessons taken from Fukushima.
Because in fact, in Japan, what happened was there were a lot of layers of bureaucracy that they had to go through, and that delayed decision making. Is that right?
Yes, and I think these were lessons that the United States learned after or during the 3 Mile Island accident.
Yes.
And those lessons were then codified into law, and the Nuclear Regulatory Agency was restructured according to those lessons.
Great. Thank you. Thank you very much, Mr. Chairman. I appreciate it.
Gentlelady yields back her time. Chair now recognizes the gentleman from Mississippi, Mr. Harper, 5 minutes.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, and thank each of you for being here. And it is encouraging to see a much greater level of cooperation among the commissioners than perhaps in previous years, and so that does bring some comfort. And if I may start with you, Madam Chair, when we had discussions previously, I had to ask you if you had read and reviewed the NRC Inspector General's conclusions in the June 6, 2011 and June 26, 2012 reports, and at that point you had not. So I'm curious if you have had a chance to do that since.
Yes, I have.
Okay, and that I know there were revised procedures after the 1 and 11. Have there been any other revisions that I've missed since the June 26, 2012 report as a result of that?
As a result of, no, I don't believe so.
Have you taken any actions to address the IG's conclusions that we need to be aware of?
No.
Are there any that you believe you should make based upon the rather comprehensive report in 2012?
No.
Did you agree with those conclusions that were in the report? I know
I don't
putting you
take
on the spot with the
I don't take a view on those.
Okay.
You know, I wasn't here during that period, so I don't have a view on.
Yeah, and I understand you weren't here, but obviously we'd like to make sure that some of those don't repeat themselves. So I am appreciative that you have read those. And if I may ask, on August 1st, the NRC provided its status report on power uprates to the Commission. And of course, power uprate is a term for the process where a nuclear plant requests approval to increase their power output, correct?
Mm-hmm.
And to date, the NRC has approved 74 power uprate requests totaling over 7,000 megawatts of additional capacity, roughly the equivalent of 7 new plants. So this is a well-established practice. That would be true also, wouldn't it?
Mm-hmm. Yes.
You know, in the staff's report, they indicate that a number of power uprate projects have been canceled, freeing up 3.9 full-time equivalent reduction of staff work. And the staff also notes how they continue to have challenges in meeting their performance goals, even though the goals for reviewed timeliness were increased 50%. Of the 14 applications under review, 3 were filed in 2004 and another one in 2008, even though the performance goal for reviewing these applications was less than 12 months. In fact, none of the applications currently under review have met their performance goal. And I'll briefly summarize, if I may. You know, it's a well-established program with a decreasing workload, but the staff is falling far short of meeting timeliness goals in spite of these goals being increased 50%. To me, that sounds like a program in need of management and accountability, and I'll give you an opportunity to respond in a moment. And the Commission response, what was that? It said, it is no longer necessary to provide the Commission the periodic status report on power uprates, and if specific issues arise, to inform the Commissioner's assistance accordingly. Employees focus on what their bosses focus on. If timeliness is of no concern to the Commission, it appears it might not be for the NRC staff. The Commission's lack of leadership on this issue will only further undermine schedule discipline at the NRC. The Commission's efficiency principle states this: the American taxpayer, the rate-paying consumer, and licensees are all entitled to the best possible management and administration of regulatory activities. Regulatory decisions should be made without undue delay. And I'd like to hear from each of you on how you think that the Commission would best be able to restore some stability and predictability to this core program. And if I could ask you that, Madam Chair.
To the power uprate program?
Yes.
Yes. Thank you for the question. Of course, we are concerned with working as efficiently and as effectively as possible, always, and in terms of power uprates as well. We have been working under specific circumstances the past year or two. In particular, this past year, we have suffered, like many agencies, sequestration. which has affected our ability to be responsive in a number of areas, and power uprates may be one of those. In addition to which, we have taken on additional work for waste confidence that has redirected staff resources. For Fukushima and being responsive to that, that's redirected staff resources as well. And then we have the piece of the industry responsiveness, and again, I go back to statements I've made earlier that when we receive applications from licensees, we need high-quality applications that don't generate a number of answers, and then we need efficient responses as well.
And I see my time has expired, and I yield back. Thank you.
Gentleman yields back his time, and we want to thank you all. A few short comments, and if Mr. Tonko wants to add. I was invited to and attended the Yucca Economic Symposium put on by Nevadans in Reno a couple weeks ago, so I just throw that out as an interesting comment. A lot of the comments today by my colleagues, I think, were based upon, the industry fears it's on a knife edge with nat gas pressures and this cumulative effect of regulation. And so I think that's that balance that you may have heard from a lot of my colleagues. And a commission form of government is the chairman is responsible for agendas and the staff, but you are all still one among equals on casting votes, and whether that's at the municipal level or whether that's at the level, and we applaud the camaraderie and moving forward and what we've been able to do. I do have two announcements. One is Vinny Esposito's last day as our nuclear fellow. He's been tremendously helpful to us and to me personally, and I want to wish him Godspeed, and thanks for your help. I'd like to finish by thank you all for coming. It was a long hearing, but it was a good one, and I think we all learned a lot. I want to remind members that they have 10 business days to submit additional questions for the record, and as promptly as you can in response to those. We would appreciate that, and I would say the hearing is now adjourned.